Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Magicians. Another great episode. I really appreciate how they told the story in this episode. I kind of knew of it ahead of time because I saw the previews last week, but I still appreciate it. It worked out a lot differently than I thought it would, just because you had the situation of like it wasn't like, oh, we focus on one story, then we cut to another story. Like, I figured all the stories were tied together. That's just how this was. But it cut back and forth between different people's stories. And you kind of got bits and pieces. Like, because a lot of the stories were super short. Some were a little bit longer. Like, Harriet's, I feel like, was probably the longest one. But maybe that's just my imagination. But, and Elliot and Margot, they pop up for literally, like, what, a minute in a story, and then it's like we never cut back to that. But I do appreciate, because really the story is being told from Penny's perspective, because it's like, okay, Penny's reading the book, it's like, okay, what's up with this, and he's kind of reading everybody's story. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting perspective. First of all, my biggest question is, what's up with the whole Cassandra thing, and why does she look like Alice? Was she like designed to look like Alice? Was that supposed to be meant as, because of everything playing out the way it does in the episode, Sylvia ultimately betraying Penny? It makes me wonder, was that supposed to be a tactic to kind of distract him, keep him so distracted by that he's not focusing on what she's actually writing? I actually appreciate that storyline. I thought it was kind of interesting, because basically she's the one that writes everyone's books in the library, because she basically sees the future, but she can only do one at a time. And so basically with magic, the library was able to industrialize, is the word they use. So basically they can mass produce the books, but now that magic is going, she's going back to doing one at a time. So like I said, with the whole everything, she's meant to kind of, she ends up turning Penny in. So probably everything from the very beginning was like, hey, we need to keep Penny here distracted as long as possible. So the question then becomes like, was that part of it? Or is she like, is she Alice from like a different timeline? Like, why does she look like Alice? Is she like an ancestor of Alice? Because they were like, oh, she's been in the library for thousands. Was it like 1,000 years or thousands of years? Either way, she's been in the library for a long time, but it's still like, why the hell do you look like Alice? So not unless we're dealing with like a time thing, because let's not forget, time works differently inside of the library. And especially with what Alice's story ends up being, because basically it's her going to the library to complete the knowledge that she had as a Niffin. And she's willing to do and that's kind of sad, because like there's this whole quest about trying to collect the keys and everything, but she's so caught up in trying to accomplish what she couldn't accomplish before that she's not willing to really help out with this situation. It's like, she just tells Quentin to leave, but it's like, you're so focused on wanting to get what you want. And it seems like that might be what happened. Maybe like that, the other half of like what she was trying to find out, like with all that knowledge at her disposal, maybe it eventually eventually everything kind of drove her mad, but maybe that's what it is. That really is Alice, but she doesn't feel like Alice anymore. I mean, Alice is already feeling like that. So maybe over the centuries that she's been there, because time works differently in the library, then maybe that's kind of manifesting it as her kind of developing another personality and being like, no, I'm no longer Alice. Alice is dead. Like, because even at this point in time, she doesn't even know who Quinn is, because she's so lost and everything. So maybe that kind of plays into it. So that's probably more likely the situation. Like I said, a weird time thing, because it's like, because it's almost like a paradox, because it's like, if Cassandra's there and then Alice is there, but then time travel, it's weird. So I'm assuming that it's going to be her future. So the question is, though, why did Sylvia betray Penny? Especially considering everything Sylvia did before. Not unless all of that was like a part of a long game, which I don't think it was. And I appreciate that she is back in the story, because even last season, I felt like, especially when they introduced her, I was like, are they just going to kill her off? I feel like there's got to be more to her story than that, especially with the trouble of introducing her. It's like, oh yeah, her dad, which we don't really know too much about, but it's like, oh, your dad's kind of a bad guy potentially, and you're kind of in kind of like magic witness protection to a certain extent. So maybe it has to deal with that. It's like, but why did she betray Penny? It's most likely because, it's the whole aspect of, even when you're a librarian and you die, you're still in servitude to them. So in this particular case, there's probably even tighter punishments because of what she did, because she broke the rule and went inside the poison room. So that had an element to it. You had the whole Poppy situation. Poppy being she even calls it herself, she's like, I'm kind of an asshole. She's like, quitting so wanting to change himself. And I thought it was kind of an interesting perspective for Quentin, because he's like, I'm not the hero, but I'm thinking that if I complete this quest, maybe I can become the hero by doing and this quest that needs a hero, by completing it, I can actually be the hero. I can turn myself into the hero, and just, I don't know, it's kind of interesting because it's like seeing Quentin kind of put all this weight on his shoulders, because for him it's like, I know who I am. I'm not the hero. I'm not the one that kind of saves the day. I'm kind of one that kind of screws things up, and he doesn't want to do that. You know, he wants to kind of make everything right. You know, but it's like he doesn't want to get other people mixed up in this. Like obviously there's a whole like mirror bridge situation, so it's like no one wants to get, you know, Victoria killed or anyone else killed, because this could be like a suicide mission. But Poppy bounces. Probably the biggest thing we learned in this episode was probably the whole Harriet situation. We ended up finding out that Harriet is actually Zelda's daughter, which is kind of interesting. Makes you wonder who's the dad, but it's kind of like, I don't know, like it's just something you don't really think about, just because, you know, she's kind of head librarian. So you think like, oh yeah, which begs the question, who's her boss? Like there's all these rules, but someone had to have created it before Zelda. You would think. I don't know if that's ever really come up. I mean, this is like a branch of the library. She's head librarian. Well, no, because it's all connected, because there's only like one library, but there's different branches of that one specific library, right? Or am I like misunderstanding how that whole library situation was? Nevertheless, it seems like from a very young age, Harriet was very rebellious, because she wanted to see the outside world, so she would leave from time to time. Hence why she actually aged it all. If not, she would have stayed a little girl forever. I'm sure that probably would have bothered her a little bit too, but nevertheless, she went out in the world because she wanted to see more. In particular, her mom didn't want her to go to Fillory, but I think that was more so just the fact of the matter is, I don't want you going anywhere. It's like, you want adventure. There's all these different books, because, you know, Zelda was like, I was so young and I went out, which also begs the question too. Like, the fact is, that kind of shows you that at some point, I mean, that's something I didn't even think about. The fact is, Zelda obviously did leave the library at some point in time. I mean, obviously, she kind of tells you when she's like, I was so young and I saw too much. Too young to really, you know, handle all that I saw. Probably like all the kind of bad stuff that comes with life. And it's like, you know, she didn't want that life for her and her daughter. So it's like, hey, let's stay here in the library. Like, we have all these great adventures. But the point I'm making is like, oh yeah, because obviously you see how old Zelda is. If she had never left the library, she'd be a lot younger than what she is. So I don't know, it's something to kind of think about. I guess it also depends on what point in someone's life that they went to the library. I mean, who's to say, like, she's not the exact age she was before, you know, she decided to step into the whole library situation. I mean, it makes you wonder how that whole head librarian situation, like I said, is that something you're born into? Because the library seems like it's a job situation you kind of get kind of pushed into, but nevertheless. But the fact is that because the library is what it is, the whole aspect of like, well, we need to open it up is what Harriet wanted. Like, open it up to other people. We could do so much with it. But Zelda wasn't all about that, because it's like against the rules. And there's the whole aspect of like, there's so much knowledge, so much good could be done with the knowledge in the library, but there's also the bad, you know. And Harriet, her main goal, well, one of her main goals is to open up the library to have it for everyone to have, whether they be good or bad, to have access to all that knowledge, because it's not right for it just to be cooped up, because so much could be done with that. Also, she's looking for one thing in particular, a massive battery. It's essentially what Mayakovsky had, but like on a much larger scale. It's kind of how like the magicians end up using magic, which is kind of interesting. Like, real, well, I'll get back to my point I made. But it's just so interesting with the whole Harriet situation. Like, no matter how much time passed, like, we see that the last time she went to the library was like, well, last time she was in the library at first was like 85, and then she left, and she didn't come back until like 2007. So she was gone for 22 years. And then it took her another like 11 before she came back again, and that's under these circumstances. So, but the point I was going to make is, we, like, obviously Julia and Finn end up finding out about the whole fairy situation, which there's a whole complexity to that, because there's the whole fact is they meet that fairy named Sky, which they're kind of slaves to Irene, which Irene the favor she wanted from Julia is to help her, because it's like, she's got all these markings on her body, which are kind of like ramifications for using the powder, which we know, like even last episode, we know is fairies. Which Finn obviously has a reservations for wanting to help, because it's like, I don't want to help them out because of the fact of the matter is all they've done, like they essentially killed my child. But Julia, it's like, no, like no one deserves to be enslaved. Like, yeah, they might be pieces of crap, the fairies that you're dealing with, but that doesn't justify this. These fairies, I mean, Julia doesn't say that, but the fact of the matter is, it's like, these fairies didn't do that to you. That was the queen and all the fairies that are in Fillory. These are people who are being enslaved, and as we can see, being used as ingredients to be ground up. So, but the way Sky talks about it, it seems like Irene is manipulated because it's like, no, 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 we're not slaves. She's protecting us from bad magicians. And the fact of the matter is, and it's like, they don't even know that there are other fairies. So it's like, how did that happen? Did they go to Fillory at some point in time and snatch up some young fairies? Like, did they kidnap some baby fairies? Essentially what Margot and Elliot were kind of doing, and they brought them to Earth. And it's like, oh, we can use them as a power source. But like, why are they what they are? You know, it kind of begs the question, like, you had magic and everything, so why did you need the fairies to kind of be your servants? Is that how, like, Irene's family's kind of stayed in power all this time or something like that? They've always had a little bit of an edge? Like, what is the whole purpose of that? I mean, because it seems like she's got those markings and everything, so it seems like this whole, like, grinding them up in the dust has probably been a long family tradition of theirs, so it's probably been going on for a very long time. Might be kind of one of the reasons why the fairies are acting the way they are with the whole Earth, with the whole Fillory situation, is because they're probably going extinct because of what's happening, I'm assuming. But then things get even more interesting because we see that the traveler dude that works at the library has a whole case of it. So it's like, okay, what's going on here? So that means there's a connection between Zelda and Irene. So why is the library stocking up on all of that? Like those things in particular, those like ground up fairies. Why would you do that? And at the same time, too, they're all about the quest because they were like, oh, yeah, so I need you to do something for me. Like, oh, you want us to help you out, Alice. Well, do you know about the 7 keys? And so that's probably going to work into Alice kind of betraying the group. And it's like, I'll help you track down the 7 keys. Probably because they have to steal them back from everybody else, though. But from the team and everything. So, and now the team's a little scattered and everything because Penny's kind of being dragged away. I did like that whole Benedict situation of like Benedict actually lied and had the key the entire time because it's like he thought if he lied, eventually Penny would just give up and just come back because it's like. But even Penny admitted, okay, I kind of lied to you and everything, but at the very least, you were the only person that actually cried about me dying, and it's like. That is true, and that's super sad. And I just showed you what kind of person Benedict is, dude. Like, he's so desperate to have a friend, especially it's like, oh my god, I thought you came. Oh, you didn't actually come here for me. I thought you were my friend. Oh, you just wanted the key. Also, I love the fact is that Penny basically a payment for trying to get help in the underworld. It's like, oh, he had to give them Game of Thrones spoilers. Like, oh, what's going on? That's his payment. But granted, it seems like Penny doesn't really watch the show, so he was just like talking like mad bullshit, and I love it. So we have Victoria and Harriet potentially being lost in a mirror bridge because the traveler dude broke it, which I'm curious to see what Zelda does about that whole situation, considering it's like, yeah, you potentially killed my daughter, but it might be a situation where it's like more like a pocket dimension that you might be able to get to, but you might not, so they might be lost forever. But it seems like Quentin, Poppy, and Katie at the very least made it back. Alice is still there, Penny's in his situation, Julia and Finn's dealing with the whole Irene situation. And once again, Elliot and Margot are currently on trial for everything that's wrong with Fillory, essentially. So I'm very curious to see how that all plays out. Like, so this episode left you with so many questions, and so I'm so interested to see like how it all like plays out, like where this story is taking us. Especially the Poppy situation. It's like Poppy's sole purpose in this episode was kind of to be an asshole, but I guess it's to play into the point of like, oh, you got to be true to yourself. If you're an asshole, be an asshole. Don't try and change, you know? So weird message to kind of leave with someone, but you know. And now I'm sitting here thinking about maybe like the reason why Irene's family is connected to like the library is because maybe they're powerful people, so maybe they're on like kind of like a board of directors type of situation, not only for break bills, but also the library. Like maybe this is like some kind of like grand like thing of like trying to fix everything. I don't know, because it seems like they both want it. It seems like Irene kind of wants the whole like magic return situation, which everyone does, but it seems like it's more like they might be heading for like a monopoly situation of like they get all the magic and kind of keep it hidden away. I don't know, we'll see. I'm curious to see what the whole library situation turns about, especially with Harriet and everything. So, and then what's going to befall Penny? Most likely he's going to be kind of slapped into servitude and everything, especially being in the underworld and the library and everything. So what's going to befall him there. Are we going to see Sylvia having a change of heart and actually helping him out, or is she just kind of stuck in this old situation like him? I don't know. I do know the title of the next episode, which has got me very interested. I'm assuming it's going to have to all deal with Josh, because that's the name of the, literally, well, ain't it like all about Josh or something? It's literally the title of the episode. It's something different, something Josh. So I think that's it. But I'm curious to see what that's all about. Like I said, I brought it up, was it last week's episode? Because yeah, Victoria brought up Josh. Like, we haven't seen Josh since, like I said, Quentin and Julia went to like that God's party. I think that was the last time we've seen Josh in the storyline. So I'm curious to see what that's all about as well. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.